On Mother's Day, my daughter gave her mother-in-law a diamond necklace worth $25,000 and a luxury cruise to Italy. And me, I got a supermarket cake and a plastic card. That evening, she posted happy family photos on Facebook with captions like, "Celebrating with my real family." The next day, she called me 35 times, her husband called 12, and even her mother-in-law left a voicemail, sounding unusually polite. Why? Because I had just signed the paperwork to sell my company for millions of dollars, and they had no idea I even owned it. A T68. I was supposed to be the quiet old lady, fading into the background, but life had one more unforgettable chapter waiting for me. If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or disrespected by your own family, this story is for you. And if you enjoy real-life stories with shocking twists and uplifting endings, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss out on stories that truly matter. Even if you're just listening while cooking, gardening, or relaxing at home, have you ever been treated like you were nothing, only to later show them you were everything? Let's begin. I used to believe that after 60, life would finally slow down, that I would enjoy quiet mornings with my husband by my side and simple afternoons surrounded by family. But life had other plans. 3 years ago, my world fell silent when Harold, my husband of 42 years, passed away. The house, once filled with laughter, was now just walls and empty rooms. Every morning, I would make coffee for one, sit by the window, and listen to the sound of nothing. No footsteps, no conversations, just the wind brushing against the old oak tree outside. At first, I told myself it was peace, but after a few months, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. Our daughter, Lily, had moved to the city with her husband, Peter, and they quickly built a life where I seemed to disappear. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rare, and celebrations always seemed to happen somewhere else. The last Thanksgiving, they called me, not to invite me, but to tell me they were too busy to make the drive. Christmas was even quieter, just me, my cat, and a TV dinner. Neighbors often said, "At least you have your memories." But memories are tricky. They don't always comfort you. Sometimes, they haunt you with the things you'll never have again. One day, while shopping for groceries, I saw Lily's post on social media, a picture of her, Peter, and his mother having lunch at a fancy restaurant. With the caption, "Family moments are priceless." I stood there, frozen, clutching a basket of instant noodles, realizing that even on the days that mattered, I wasn't part of the picture. Funny thing is, I never really asked for much. Not diamonds, not vacations, just a call, a visit, maybe a genuine hug. And now, standing alone in my quiet house, the memories felt heavier than ever. Sometimes, I would laugh to myself, remembering how Harold used to joke, "One day, they'll come running back when they realize how much you're worth." I thought he was just being sweet, comforting me in advance. But little did I know, Harold had set things in motion years ago to make sure I was never truly powerless. Back then, I didn't pay attention to business papers, investment meetings, or land deeds. I was too busy raising a family, cooking dinners, and cheering from the sidelines while they built their careers. But Harold, he was watching, planning, quietly building something just for me. Something that would one day change everything. At T68, I was supposed to fade away quietly, but the truth was, the silence was only temporary. My story was just getting started. Mother's Day used to be my favorite holiday, a day when Harold would make breakfast, Lily would bring me flowers, and we would spend the whole afternoon laughing together, sharing stories from the past. But this Mother's Day felt different. The morning started quietly, like every other morning since Harold passed. No phone calls, no messages. I made my own coffee, fixed myself a simple breakfast, and sat in my worn-out armchair, watching the clock. By noon, I thought maybe they had forgotten. Then, just after 1 o'clock, my phone finally rang. It was Lily. Her voice was cheerful, almost rehearsed. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," she said. "We'll stop by this afternoon." For a moment, my heart lifted, thinking, maybe they remembered me after all. Maybe there would be lunch together, or just some time where I wouldn't feel invisible. Around 3, they arrived. Lily, Peter, and his mother, Sylvia, wearing a brand new designer dress, sparkling with jewelry, looking like she had just stepped out of a magazine. Lily handed me a small plastic bag from a discount store. Inside was a prepackaged supermarket cake and a plastic greeting card that said, "World's okayest mom." No flowers, no real card, no personal note. Sylvia, on the other hand, got a fancy box, wrapped in gold ribbon. When she opened it, everyone gasped. A diamond necklace, gleaming under the sunlight, worth $25,000, and tucked inside was an envelope with 2 first-class tickets for a luxury cruise around Italy. They laughed, took selfies, popped champagne, right there in my living room, celebrating Sylvia, while I sat quietly, with my supermarket cake, untouched, on the table. I smiled, because it seemed like the polite thing to do, but inside, my heart sank deeper than I ever thought possible. As they chatted, I overheard bits of conversation. Sylvia talked about her new kitchen renovation, Peter bragged about his business deal, and Lily, well, she mostly complained about work stress and how taking care of an aging mother was such a burden. I sat there, feeling like a piece of furniture, something you glance at, but never really see. When they left, there was no warm hug, no words of love, just a casual, "See you next time." That evening, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw it. Lily had posted a picture, the 3 of them, holding champagne glasses, with the caption, "Blessed to spend the day with my real family." I stared at that photo for a long time. It wasn't just the necklace or the cruise, it was the words, "real family," that cut the deepest. For a brief second, I felt tears welling up, but then, I remembered something Harold used to say, "Never let someone's poor behavior change your good heart, but never let them walk all over it either." At that moment, something inside me shifted. Maybe they thought I had nothing left. Maybe they thought I was weak, forgotten, irrelevant. But they had no idea who I really was, or what I still held in my hands. That night, as I lay in bed, one thought echoed in my mind. They wanted to treat me like nothing. But soon, they would realize I was everything. The morning after Mother's Day, I woke up, but something felt different. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. Instead, there was clarity. I stood by my bedroom window, staring out at the quiet street, and suddenly, I remembered. Tucked away, in the bottom drawer of Harold's old desk, was a folder, thick, sealed, collecting dust for years. I hadn't looked at it since the funeral, for a long time. I thought it was just old paperwork, something Harold forgot to throw away. But something told me it was time to open it. I went downstairs, made myself a fresh cup of coffee, and slowly opened the drawer. The folder was still there, exactly where Harold left it, with my name written on the cover, in his familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfastened the clip. Inside was a collection of documents that took my breath away. Deeds, contracts, bank statements, and letters, all organized, all carefully planned by Harold. Years ago, while I was busy raising our daughter, cooking meals, keeping our home in order, Harold had been quietly investing, quietly building, quietly protecting our future. He had purchased shares in a local logistics company, which had grown into a multi-million-dollar operation. He had acquired plots of land just outside the city, land that was now zoned for commercial development, worth millions. I stared at the numbers, the signatures, the property details. It felt surreal, like I was reading someone else's life. But no, this was mine. Harold had left it all, in my name. Everything. Not Lily, not Peter, not even a mention of Sylvia. It was all mine. My heart swelled, not because of the money, but because Harold had trusted me, even when I didn't trust myself. He had seen my worth when everyone else had forgotten it. The documents also included a letter, written by Harold, in his neat handwriting. It read, "My darling Margaret, I know how the world changes after 60. People stop seeing you, they stop listening. But I have always known you were the heart, the strength, and the quiet power behind everything we built. This is for you to live, to choose, to remind yourself you are not invisible. I read it again and again, each word lifting the weight off my chest. In that moment, something changed inside me. The woman they thought was fragile, forgotten, had just discovered she held power beyond their imagination. I took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to myself, they have no idea who they're dealing with. That day, I called Harold's old lawyer, Mr. Bennett, who still remembered me fondly. I scheduled a meeting to go over the assets and finalize any pending transactions. It was the first time in 3 years I felt alive again. Not just existing, not just surviving, but alive, with purpose and strength. Later that afternoon, my neighbor, Linda, stopped by, gossiping about her daughter's fancy new car, her son-in-law's promotion, her grandchildren's expensive schools. I listened, smiled politely, but inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control, dignity, and the quiet, unstoppable satisfaction of knowing that soon, the people who treated me like a burden would discover the true value of the woman they so easily dismissed. And I couldn't wait. After my meeting with Mr. Bennett, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I wasn't going to explain myself, and I definitely wasn't going to beg for love. That should have come freely. Instead, I would play the quiet game. From that day forward, I wore my oldest clothes, my most faded shoes, and drove my little car that rattled every time it turned left. I wanted them to believe I was struggling, that my life was as empty as they assumed it to be. A week later, Lily called, not to check on me, but to casually mention how much work it was taking care of her mother-in-law, and how stressful things were financially. I listened calmly, replying with simple words, "Oh, I'm managing, just living on my little pension, and stretching every dollar." She seemed pleased, almost smug. That weekend, they invited me, but not to their home. Instead, I was asked to help clean out my own attic for things they could donate. I went, smiled politely, boxed up old memories, while listening to them whisper, just loud enough for me to hear, "She doesn't have much left," Lily said. "I mean, she barely manages her groceries." Peter chuckled. "Guess we'll have to figure out what to do with her house soon." Sylvia, always eager to insert herself, added, "It would be easier if she just moved into assisted living. It's safer for people her age." They spoke as if I were invisible, standing just 2 feet away. But I said nothing. I just smiled and packed up my memories. A few days later, I tested the waters further. I told Lily I was thinking about selling my house, maybe moving into a small retirement home. Her reaction was instant. "Oh, Mom, that's such a good idea," she gushed. "It would be less stressful for you, and we could help you, manage everything." Manage. What she really meant was control. Control. My home, my money, my life. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping tea, watching the stars, remembering all the sacrifices Harold and I made to build this life. And now, our daughter was ready to toss me aside, like an old chair, too worn to keep around. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. Sometimes, people don't change, they just reveal who they've been all along. The next morning, I visited a nearby retirement home, just to see. It was clean, cheerful, but every resident looked lost, waiting, forgotten. The staff smiled, but their eyes were tired. I sat with a lovely woman named Doris, who told me her children hadn't visited in over a year. Too busy, too far, too important. I thanked her, left, and realized exactly where I did not want to end up. When I got home, I found another message from Lily. She had already started gathering brochures, contacting moving companies, and even offered to help sell off the things you won't need anymore. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about my well-being. It was about their convenience, and I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, or at least let them believe it. because sometimes the sweetest revenge is letting people dig their own hole while you quietly build your empire. For the next few weeks, I kept up the act. I visited thrift stores, complained about grocery prices, and dropped little comments about how tough it was to make ends meet. Lily became more attentive, more helpful, but not in the way a loving daughter should be. No, she wasn't checking on me, she was checking on my assets. She brought over forms from realtors, recommended a friend who could sell my house fast, and even mentioned a financial advisor who could help me manage my little savings. I smiled, nodded, and let her believe she was in control, but behind the scenes, Mr. Bennett and I were preparing a little surprise. We drew up a brand new will, one that reflected the reality of my life, a reality that Lily knew nothing about. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I invited them all over: Lily, Peter, Sylvia, and even their teenage kids, who rarely acknowledged my existence. I told them I wanted to discuss important family matters. The room buzzed with anticipation. They thought I was about to hand everything over to them. Peter leaned forward, eager. Lily clutched her notebook. Sylvia wore a satisfied grin. I took a deep breath and calmly said, "I've decided to sell everything." Lily gasped. Peter's jaw dropped. Sylvia chimed in. "That's such a wise decision, dear," I continued. "The proceeds will go to a foundation I've set up, the Golden Years Fund, supporting elderly people who are abandoned by their own families." Silence. Dead, heavy silence. I watched their faces shift from shock to disbelief to panic. Lily stammered, "Wait, what about us, your family?" I smiled politely. "I've come to realize that family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about kindness, respect, and genuine care." Peter's face turned red. Sylvia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Lily tried to recover. "But Mom, we care. We've always cared." I nodded slowly. "Of course, you care. That's why you've spent the last month planning which nursing home to send me to, and which company would get commission from selling my home." Sylvia stood up, flustered. "That's outrageous. We were only trying to help." I stayed calm, completely calm. "I appreciate the offer, but help is something you give without expecting to cash in." I then reached for the folder on the table and gently pushed it towards them. "Here are the documents confirming the transfer of assets to my foundation. It's done, signed, finalized." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but not from love, from frustration. Peter stood up, muttering about legal rights, but I cut him off. "The lawyers have handled everything. You have no claim." Sylvia tried to speak, but I politely excused them. "I think it's best if we end this conversation here." They left, furious, speechless, defeated. And I sat back, sipped my tea, and felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't powerless. I was Margaret, a woman who may have been forgotten by her daughter, but was remembered by herself. And I promised, from that moment on, I would live for me. You would think, after what I said, they would leave me alone, but no. A few days later, Lily showed up, flowers in hand, with the fakest smile I had ever seen. "Mom," she said sweetly, "I've been thinking, we didn't treat you fairly. We want to make it up to you, as a family." Peter sent me text messages, talking about new beginnings, and Sylvia even invited me to dinner. It was amusing. Clearly, the idea of losing access to my money had flipped a switch in them, but I wasn't angry anymore. Just entertained. I played along. I told Lily I might reconsider some things, but I needed to know who truly cared for me. Her eyes lit up. "Of course, Mom, we care. We'll do anything." I nodded slowly. "Good, because I need help, real help." And that's how my little test began. I asked Lily to come live with me for 1 month. No vacations, no trips, just her, caring for me, cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, helping me around the house, just like I had done for her her entire childhood. At first, she smiled. "Absolutely, Mom. I'll be there tomorrow. The first day, she showed up early, cooked breakfast, even cleaned the windows. She posted photos, taking care of my beautiful mom. Peter commented, "So proud of you, babe." But by day 3, the cracks appeared. She burned toast, snapped at me when I asked for help opening a jar, and complained about back pain from all this bending and scrubbing. By day 6, she ordered takeout instead of cooking, left dishes in the sink, and spent most of the day on her phone. I watched quietly. By day 10, she skipped breakfast altogether and left me alone, saying she had errands. By day 14, she told me this wasn't good for her mental health and asked if I could cut the trial short. I smiled gently, "But sweetheart, we agreed on a month, remember?" She sighed dramatically. "I have work, I have responsibilities. I'm not a nurse." Exactly. That evening, I called Mr. Bennett, updated my plans, and arranged the final steps to sell the company Harold left me for a sum far beyond their comprehension. On the last day of the so-called trial, Lily packed her things, forced a hug, and said, "You know I tried, Mom, but I'm just not cut out for this." I hugged her back. "That's all right, dear. You've taught me everything I needed to know." A week later, I announced publicly that the company had been sold to an international group for over $8 million. Lily and Peter were not mentioned anywhere. Sylvia didn't call anymore. And me? I booked my first cruise to Greece, first class, balcony suite, champagne included. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need to be anyone's afterthought. For the first time in years, I was simply me, Margaret, independent, strong, free, and it felt incredible. Life didn't end at 60-8. In fact, it was just beginning. With my company sold, my house finally peaceful, and no one calling to demand favors, I felt lighter than I had in decades. For the first time in years, I asked myself, what do I want? Not what Lily expected, not what society said, just me. And my heart whispered, adventure. I booked my first trip, a cruise through the Greek islands, something Harold and I had always dreamed of, but never got the chance. The moment I stepped onto that ship, I felt like a new woman. I stood at the railing, watching the waves sparkle in the sunlight, and smiled. This was freedom. During dinners, I met travelers from around the world, older women like me, who had stories of love, loss, and starting over. One evening, at a sunset cocktail hour, I reconnected with someone I hadn't seen in 50 years, Thomas, an old friend from high school, now a successful real estate developer, with silver hair, a charming smile, and the same twinkle in his eye. We laughed, shared memories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as someone's mother, or someone's widow, but just Margaret. When the cruise ended, Thomas and I stayed in touch. We met again, this time in Florida, where he introduced me to his group of friends, a circle of kind-hearted, independent people who valued life for its simple joys. I began volunteering with organizations that supported older adults, especially those abandoned by their families. It gave me purpose. It gave me community. Every week, I danced, I painted, I learned new recipes, and I smiled more than I had in decades. I even joined a beginner's yoga class, though I mostly giggled through the poses. And one unforgettable afternoon, I tried my first TikTok dance, taught by a group of lively seniors, who reminded me that age is just a number. When I wasn't traveling, I hosted dinner nights, where laughter filled my home once again. No stress, no judgments, just good people, sharing stories, good food, and real friendship. I looked at my life and realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, fully, joyfully, without apology, because the truth is, no one gets to decide when your best years end. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters begin when you least expect them. And for me, they were just getting started. Months passed, and life became beautifully simple. I traveled, I laughed, I built friendships, and I found joy in every sunrise. But life has a funny way of coming full circle. One morning, while enjoying my coffee, I received A message from an old neighbor. It said, "You won't believe what's happening." Curious, I clicked the link, and there it was. An online auction for Sylvia's mansion, foreclosure, bankruptcy, all those diamonds, designer handbags, and luxury cruises couldn't save them from poor decisions. A few days later, news spread around town. Peter's business had collapsed. Bad investments, mounting debts, and lawsuits had left them nearly penniless. Lily, who once bragged about being too busy, too important, was now applying for jobs. Ironically, the only place willing to hire her was a local elder care center, taking care of seniors just like me. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I smiled quietly, because life always finds a way to teach lessons, and I was living proof that dignity always wins. With the help of my lawyer, I made one final decision. I purchased Sylvia's foreclosed mansion at a fraction of its value, not to live in, but to turn it into a safe home for abandoned elderly women, a place filled with laughter, comfort, and love, a place where no one would ever feel invisible. When the community heard about it, support poured in. I hosted an open house and welcomed the first group of wonderful ladies into their new home. No one judged them, no one ignored them. They were valued, respected, celebrated. One evening, I stood in the garden, watching the sunset, thinking about Harold, and smiled. He would have been proud. From a woman they tried to discard, I had become a force of kindness and strength, and maybe, just maybe, my story would remind others, especially women like me, that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Before heading inside, I checked my phone. Another message, this time from Lily. "Hi Mom, I'd really like to reconnect. Maybe have dinner sometime?" I thought for a moment, smiled softly, and put the phone away. Not today. I had better things to do, because at 69, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And for those who treated me like I was nothing, they finally learned I was everything. If there's one lesson we can all take away from Margaret's story, it's this: never, ever underestimate a quiet person, especially a mother who's spent her life sacrificing, building, and loving without asking for much in return. Too many times, society pushes older people, especially older women, into the shadows. But stories like this remind us that life after 60 can be bold, powerful, and filled with second chances. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted? Did you ever surprise people by showing them how strong you really are? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just inspire someone else. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true life journeys with unforgettable twists and empowering endings, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that touches your heart. And if you're curious, we've picked another incredible story for you. Just click on the next video here. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. Remember, life doesn't end, it simply begins a new chapter.